This next book I have for you is a memoir. I don't review many memoirs, but it came out in the 70s and has always been one of those names floating around in the back of my head that I know I should familiarize myself with. Never read anything else by her up until now, and I'm glad I read this. It was an interesting book. The book is called The Woman Warrior: Memoirs of Girlhood Among Ghosts by Maxine Kingston. Supposed to be, when all of this multiculturalism and I don't say that derisively. I know that probably sounded like I meant it derisively, but multiculturalism and feminist literature and literature written in English that's about experiences about people abroad, other countries, other cultures, other genders, other sexualities were being written. This came out in 1975, so it's 40 years old next year, which is sort of hard to believe. But I've never read it, so despite how often it is actually assigned in university classes, I never read it until now. The Woman Warrior is haunted with ghosts. Mexican ghosts, Negro ghosts, white ghosts, janitor ghosts, teacher ghosts, and so on. And I don't mean this to be a paranormal or a spiritual observation. The author uses the term so casually we know what she's talking about. A ghost is almost anything or anyone outside of her Chinese-born family. But that still left me wanting a fuller explanation. And from what I saw, we don't really get one. So what is a ghost, really? A ghost is something that, despite its seeming absence, still leaves a trace of itself, a residue that can't be erased. And ghosts in this book are a metaphor that runs throughout the book and is extraordinarily apropos for a book that is, I think, at its core about the archetypal clash between two cultures. I enjoyed the novel as a total reading experience, and I guess there's not much more that you can ask from a book of fiction to enjoy it more than a total reading experience. But I felt that because I wasn't the son of Chinese immigrants, or to be more particular, the daughter of Chinese immigrants, and wasn't native-born Chinese myself, that I wasn't a woman, that I was missing something vitally important. I figure that most people who have probably enjoyed this book haven't been either Chinese or a woman, or certainly not both. So I tried to ignore how awkwardly self-conscious the book made me feel about my own identity, and I trudged merrily on. This book is about a lot of things. It's very complex. It's about growing up in the United States with parents who were born in their native China. It's about the difficulties one has living with parents who have yet to become properly acculturated, even though you as a daughter are already intimately familiar with that American culture. Even what it means to be Chinese and how the weight of Chinese history and civic mythology can weigh heavily on someone who hasn't even set foot in that country, as the fictionalized version of Maxine Kingston has never been in China. Never been to China, but she feels the weight of her Chinese ancestors and Chinese history and mythology weighing on her as she sits in her mother's San Francisco laundromat. I can see how this would have been a real punch to the literary establishment's gut when it was published 40 years ago next year, on the coattails of other myriad works important to the feminist tradition, like Fear of Flying. Not only does Maxine Kingston's story recognize her womanhood and coming to terms with that in a particular time and place in the United States, she complicates matters by recognizing her Chinese heritage and trying to reconcile that as well. that Chinese heritage, of course, having very different ideas of what it means to be a good daughter, of what it means to be a feminine woman, of what it means to be a citizen, etc. This has been sitting on my bookshelf, staring at me for several years now, making me feel very guilty. And I'm glad I finally chose to read it. Is it something that I'm ever likely to read again? Probably not. It's exactly the kind of book that college students, I think, across the humanistic disciplines, sociology, anthropology, cultural studies, etc., should be exposed to. That kind of horizon-expanding book that's full of ideas to widen the minds of parochial university freshmen, kids that never really experienced that aforementioned culture clash that I was talking about. Once out of school, many people would never again admit to reading for self-edification. I'm not one of those. That's probably the main reason why I do read. It's not for pleasure, although I do get much pleasure out of what I read. It's just that every time I stop to think about it, I can't help but think all over again how self-conscious it made me about being a privileged white male. I know, hashtag first world problems, but it just made me feel very self-conscious while I read it. Very lucky, but very self-conscious. Maxine Kingston's The Woman Warrior, Memoirs of Girlhood Among Ghosts.